Welcome to Soft Sleep Tales, a channel where timeless stories, gentle narration, and quiet atmospheres help you drift into rest. Before we begin tonight's tale, I'd love to know, where are you listening from? Share it in the comments below. It's always wonderful to see our little community stretching across the world. Now, it's time to get comfortable. Settle into your bed or favorite chair. Close your eyes. Take a slow, deep breath. Let the day melt away. Allow my voice to carry you softly into sleep to a place where imagination flows and dreams begin. A single bee, heavy with nectar, drifts low over the clover and finds the shade at the edge of an orchard. For a moment it hovers, as if listening, and then the air fills with that steady, layered sound that is never quite silence and never quite music, the deep hum of thousands of small lives moving in common time. The warmth of late June lies softly on the Devon hills, and the lanes between the hedgerows hold the scent of honeysuckle and foxglove, the way old stone holds coolness, patiently, without effort. Nothing hurries here. Even the light seems to take its time, settling into the fields as though it has nowhere else to be. The farmhouse that watches over this corner of land has learned that same unhurried way of existing. Its thick walls of local ochre stone keep the day's heat at a respectful distance, and its thatched roof, renewed in sections so many times that no one can point to the first beam and call it original, rests low and quiet against the sky. Along the southern wall, a kitchen garden leans into the sun with a kind of generous abundance. Beans and cabbages, carrots and herbs gathered so densely that the air above them seems faintly alive with fragrance. To the east, the orchard stretches in old, gnarled rows, apple trunks silvered with lichen, branches casting dappled shade over long grass that stirs only when the breeze remembers to pass through. But it is what stands beyond the orchard that makes this particular farmhouse unusual, that sets it apart from the hundreds of other Devon farms scattered across these gentle hills. Arranged in a careful arc at the far edge of the orchard, facing south to catch the morning sun, stand 14 wooden beehives, each one painted white, each one humming with its own particular pitch and rhythm, each one inhabited by tens of thousands of honeybees who have made this small corner of Devon their home and their kingdom. The woman who keeps these bees is named Eliza Marsh, and she has lived in this house for all of her 67 years. She was born here, in the same bedroom where her mother was born before her, and she has never lived anywhere else, has never wanted to, has found in this piece of land and these hives and this particular quality of Devon light everything she has ever needed to understand about the nature of the world. Eliza is a small woman, spare and strong, with white hair that she wears in a thick braid down her back, brown eyes that hold a quality of deep stillness, and hands that are remarkable for a woman of her age, broad, capable, unhurried, carrying no unnecessary tension, no unconscious gripping or clenching. They are hands that have learned over decades to move gently, to touch without startling, to work with the grain of things rather than against it. She wears, as she has worn every day for 40 years, a plain grey dress of heavy cotton, a white apron, and sturdy boots. Over these, when she tends the hives, she puts on a long linen coat, bleached by years of washing to the colour of old ivory, and a wide-brimmed hat with a fine veil of black gauze that falls around her face. She never uses the leather gloves that most beekeepers consider essential. She says the bees can feel through gloves, can sense the uncertainty of covered hands, and that bare skin communicates something that leather cannot: trust, familiarity, the calm intention of someone who means no harm. She has been stung perhaps 10,000 times in 40 years of keeping bees. She no longer swells. Her body has learned, as bodies can, to accept what it once resisted. On this particular morning in late June, Eliza is moving along the row of hives at her usual unhurried pace, checking each one in turn. She pauses before each hive, lays one hand flat against the wooden side, feels the warmth and vibration of the colony within, listens to the particular pitch of the humming. She knows each hive as she might know individual members of a family, knows their temperaments and their tendencies, knows when a colony is content and productive and when something is wrong, when they are preparing to swarm, or when the queen is failing, or when disease has entered. She is checking this morning for signs of foul brood, a bacterial illness that can devastate a colony with terrifying speed, if not caught early. She smells each hive as well as listening to it, because foul brood has a characteristic odor that Eliza can detect before any visible signs appear, something slightly sweet, but wrongly sweet, like fruit that has moved past ripeness into the early stages of rot. Today, all 14 hives smell as they should. She moves through the morning sun with the ease of long practice, pausing here to adjust a hive entrance, there to prop open a ventilation gap, noting that the fourth hive in the row is particularly active, its foragers coming and going in a continuous stream that speaks of abundant forage and a thriving queen. When she reaches the end of the row, Eliza stands for a moment, her face lifted to the warmth, her eyes half closed. The sound of the hives surrounds her, that deep, complex, layered humming that is not one sound, but many thousands of sounds, woven together into something that resembles, she has always thought, the sound of contentment itself, the sound of purposeful life, of work done in common toward ends that matter. She is here, in this moment, completely, not thinking about the letter she received yesterday, not planning tomorrow's tasks, not reviewing yesterday's regrets, simply present, simply aware, simply part of this warm morning and this sound and this place that is as much a part of her as her own breathing. This is what the bees have taught her above all other things, not through instruction but through example, through the patient insistence of their presence over 40 years. How to be here, how to be only here, only now, only this. It is a lesson she has been trying without much success to pass on to her grandson. Owen Marsh arrived 3 weeks ago on a Tuesday evening, stepping down from the village cart with a single bag and the expression of a man who has walked into a wall he did not see coming. He is 28 years old, and he had been, until recently, a promising junior architect at a respected London firm, engaged to a young woman named Caroline, whose father is a solicitor in Bloomsbury, living the kind of life that looks from the outside exactly as a young man's life should look when everything is going according to plan. Then the plan collapsed, comprehensively and all at once. The firm that employed Owen was contracted to design a warehouse complex in the East End, and Owen, who had been given charge of the project, had made an error in the structural calculations, an error that was caught before construction began, but not before it had been reviewed by the senior partners, not before Caroline's father had heard about it through his professional contacts, not before Caroline herself had decided, with a briskness that suggested she had been looking for reasons, that perhaps they were not so well suited as she had imagined. Owen was dismissed. His engagement was broken. He was living in lodgings in Pimlico, spending his days in a fog of self-recrimination and his evenings staring at the ceiling, when his mother wrote to suggest gently that perhaps a visit to his grandmother in Devon might do him good. Eliza received Owen without drama or excessive comfort. She showed him to the room he had slept in as a child, the small bedroom at the back of the house with a window that looked out over the orchard, and she told him supper would be ready at 7, and that was all. For the first several days, Owen slept long and ate little, and sat on the garden bench for hours staring at nothing in particular. Eliza left him to it, bringing him tea when she happened to pass, asking nothing, explaining nothing, making no attempt to cheer or counsel or redirect. She had seen grief before, and loss, and the specific kind of paralysis that comes when a person's image of their own life is suddenly revealed to be a fiction. She knew there was nothing to be done for it but time and patience and the slow, steady medicine of simple daily tasks. On the 4th morning, Owen wandered out to the orchard and stood at the edge of it, watching the beehives. Eliza was at the far end of the row, her back to him, moving with her usual unhurried calm. He watched her for a long time, uncertain whether to approach. Eventually, she turned and saw him standing there, and beckoned him over with a small gesture of one hand. He came, stopping a few yards from the nearest hive, close enough to hear the humming, but far enough, he hoped, to be outside the range of attention of any bee who might take exception to his presence. "Come closer," Eliza said. "I'd rather not. I don't particularly want to be stung." "You won't be if you're calm." "I am calm." Eliza looked at him with her quiet dark eyes and said nothing. Owen became aware, as he stood there, of his own body, his slightly hunched shoulders, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, the tension he was carrying in his jaw and his neck and his lower back, tension so habitual he had stopped noticing it was there. "Come closer," Eliza said again. "Slowly. Don't move quickly, and don't swat at them if they come near you. If a bee lands on you, let it." Owen moved forward, step by careful step, until he was standing beside his grandmother at the entrance of the 4th hive in the row, the active one. He could see the bees now, clearly dozens of them, a continuous flow in and out of the small entrance at the hive's base. Some returning with their leg baskets packed with yellow or orange or pale cream pollen, some setting off with an urgency that seemed almost businesslike, some simply hovering at the entrance for a moment before departing. "Watch their legs," Eliza said. "See the ones coming in with the orange pollen. That's probably from the bramble along the south hedge. The pale yellow is clover from the field at the top of the hill." Owen watched, and despite himself, found that he was indeed watching, that the constant activity at the hive entrance was holding his attention in a way that nothing had held it for weeks. It was hypnotic. The continuous purposeful motion, the variety of pollen colors, the way each returning bee navigated the crowded entrance, the way those departing seemed to know exactly where they were going. "They're remarkable," he said, and meant it. "Yes," Eliza agreed simply, "they are." A bee landed on the back of Owen's hand. He felt every muscle in his body tighten. "It's on me," he said, through very still lips. "I know. Look at it." He looked. It was small, furred with golden hair over its thorax, its abdomen banded in amber and black. Its compound eyes seemed to look back at him with a calm that was simultaneously alien and strangely familiar. It cleaned its antennae with its front legs, then lifted from his hand and flew toward the hive entrance. Owen breathed out. She was just curious, Eliza said. They investigate things that seem new or out of place. When they find nothing threatening, they leave. It's you they were uncertain about, not the other way around. Do they actually sense when someone is afraid? They sense change, rapid movement, sharp breath, the smell that fear produces on human skin. What they read as threatening is not fear itself, but the behavior fear produces. A person who is afraid moves differently, breathes differently, smells differently. The bees respond to those signals. So if you want them to be calm, you must first be calm yourself. Owen looked at her. Is that a lesson about bees or about something else? The corner of Eliza's mouth moved slightly. Perhaps both, she said, and turned back to the hive. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, Owen has fallen into a routine that he could not have predicted and would not have designed, but which has settled around him with the quiet persistence of something that knows it is needed. Each morning, he wakes early, earlier than he has woken in years, roused by the sounds of the farm, the birds and the wind, the distant cattle from the neighboring field. He comes downstairs to find Eliza already in the kitchen, her day already begun, and they eat breakfast together at the scrubbed pine table with very little conversation. And this absence of conversation feels not awkward, but restful, like a space that does not need to be filled. After breakfast, Owen helps with the farm work, the kitchen garden, the orchard, the general maintenance of a property that a woman of 67 manages largely alone. He has found, to his considerable surprise, that physical labor suits him in a way that architectural drafting never quite did. There is something satisfying about work that has immediate, visible results, about a row of weeds pulled, or a fence post repaired, or a pile of logs split and stacked. The outcome is clear, the standard is obvious, and the work does not require him to trust his own judgment in ways that might prove disastrously mistaken. In the afternoons, he helps Eliza with the bees. He is learning, slowly, to move as she moves, with that particular quality of unhurried deliberateness that the bees seem to find acceptable. He has been stung twice, both times because he flinched, both times during the first week. Since then, perhaps 8 or 9 bees have landed on him at various times, and he has allowed them their brief investigation and their departure without incident. Eliza teaches him by showing rather than telling, by doing things in his presence and trusting him to observe and to ask questions when he has them. She has explained the structure of the hive, the division of labor within it, the role of the queen and the workers and the drones. She has shown him how to use the smoker, how to apply just enough smoke to the hive entrance to calm the bees without distressing them. She has taught him the difference between a defensive hive and an aggressive one, between bees that are well fed and content, and bees that are hungry or crowded or troubled. But the things she is teaching him that are not about bees, he's only beginning to understand. On a warm Sunday morning in the 3rd week, Eliza takes Owen to meet Thomas Finch's son, a neighboring farmer named Robert, who also keeps bees and who has been supplying Eliza with certain equipment for years. Robert is a broad, ruddy man of perhaps 50, taciturn in the Devon fashion but kind in the same fashion, and he shows Owen his own hives with quiet pride. He keeps 22 colonies, nearly twice as many as Eliza, but he manages them differently, more commercially, selling his honey through a distributor in Exeter and keeping careful records of production from each hive. Owen finds the comparison instructive. Robert's approach is systematic, efficient, organized around yield and profit. Eliza's approach is organized around something harder to name, something that has to do with relationship rather than production, with her sense of partnership with the bees rather than stewardship over them. Both men's hives are healthy. Both men's honey is excellent. But the quality of attention the two beekeepers bring to their work is entirely different, and Owen suspects that this difference, invisible in the honey itself, is somehow visible in the keepers. On the walk home, he says to Eliza, "You and Robert keep bees very differently. Yes, yours feels more personal somehow, as though the bees are individuals to you, not just a resource." "Robert is a good beekeeper," Eliza says carefully. "His bees are healthy and his honey is fine. He is not wrong in his approach. But I think there are different reasons to keep bees. Robert keeps them because they are profitable, and because his father kept them before him, and it is part of what this land and this family does. These are good reasons." She pauses, adjusting her pace to step over a root across the path. "I keep them because they are my teachers, because after 40 years, I am still learning from them, because they remind me daily of things I would otherwise forget." "What do they remind you of today?" Owen asks. "What did you learn today that you might otherwise forget?" Eliza is quiet for a moment, and Owen has learned by now not to rush this silence, to allow her the time she needs to find the precise words for what she means. "The queen's cell," she says at last. "In the 7th hive, I found a single queen cell, just begun, not yet completed. It may mean they are preparing to swarm. It may mean nothing, may come to nothing." "What did you do about it?" "Nothing yet. I watched it. I noted it. I will check again in 3 days." "But doesn't it worry you? If they swarm, you lose half the colony. If they need to swarm, they will swarm, and it is not my place to prevent what is natural and necessary. My place is to be attentive, to understand what is happening, to provide the best conditions I can, and then to trust the colony to do what the colony knows how to do." She looks at him. "This is what I mean by learning from them. They remind me that control is not the same as care, that the most caring thing is often to prepare well, pay close attention, and then release the need to determine the outcome." Owen walks with this for a while, feeling it settle into him the way the sun settles into stone, slowly, thoroughly, reaching further than the surface. One afternoon in the first week of July, they are sitting together in the orchard after a long afternoon of inspecting hives. The air is still and warm, rich with the smell of grass and blossoms. The distant sound of the bees a constant presence, like the background note of a chord that contains all other notes within it. Owen has been quiet for a while, and then he says, "I keep thinking about the calculations, the structural error." Eliza waits, her hands folded in her lap. "I went over them so many times," Owen continues. "I was so certain I had checked everything. And then Henderson found it in 20 minutes. 20 minutes. And he found what I'd missed in weeks of work. I keep asking myself how it's possible to be so certain and so wrong simultaneously. Eliza is quiet for a moment. Then she says, "Do you know how a bee finds her way home?" Owen looks at her, uncertain whether this is a change of subject or something else. She follows the same path she flew out on. Partly, but she also uses the position of the sun, the Earth's magnetic field, the smell of her own hive carried on the wind. She uses multiple reference points, not just one. No single piece of information is sufficient. She triangulates constantly, using everything available to her. Eliza pauses. "When you checked your calculations, what did you use as your reference points?" Owen considers this. "My own knowledge, the standard formulas, my judgment." Your own judgment, checked against your own judgment. Essentially, yes. The bee who relies on only one reference point will find herself lost when that single reference fails. And every reference point fails sometimes. The sun is hidden, the wind shifts, the landmarks change. The bee who has learned to navigate only by the sun has no resources when the clouds come. Owen is quiet, looking at the hives visible beyond the orchard's last row of trees. "You're saying I needed someone else to check my work. I knew that, theoretically, but I trusted myself too much. I'm saying something slightly different. I'm saying that certainty on its own is not reliability. The feeling of being certain is not the same thing as being correct. The bees do not feel certain. They feel continuously, paying attention to everything, adjusting constantly, never assuming that because they were right yesterday, they will be right today." "That sounds exhausting," Owen says. "It sounds like attention," Eliza says. "There is a difference. The July days lengthen toward the summer solstice, and then begin imperceptibly to shorten. The evenings are long and golden, the Devon light taking hours to fade, the sky going through sequence after sequence of color before finally consenting to darkness. On these evenings, Owen often sits with Eliza in the garden after supper, and she talks to him about the bees in ways that are not always directly about bees. She talks about the way a colony functions as a single organism, making decisions collectively that no individual bee has the capacity to make alone. She talks about how a colony under threat becomes something focused and unified, every bee oriented toward the same purpose, the individual subsumed into the whole. One evening, she tells him about swarming. When a hive grows too large and successful, the colony produces a new queen, and the old queen leaves with roughly half the colony's population to found a new home somewhere else. It is the colony's ultimate act of reproduction, its way of perpetuating itself beyond the confines of a single hive. It looks like chaos, Eliza says. Tens of thousands of bees suddenly in the air at once, swirling, moving, settling temporarily on a branch or a fence post, while scouts go out to find a new home. If you don't understand what you're seeing, it looks like disorder, like something has gone terribly wrong. But it hasn't, Owen says. It hasn't. It's the opposite of something going wrong. It's the colony's way of saying it has grown so well, so fully, that it needs more than one hive to contain it. The chaos is the precondition for new growth. She pauses, looking at the last light on the hills. When things fall apart, Owen, it is not always because something has gone wrong. Sometimes things fall apart because they have outgrown the form they were in. Because what comes next cannot begin until what was ends. Owen sits with this for a while. The bees are quiet now, settled for the night. Only a few guards remaining at the hive entrances. The air smells of warm grass and distant rain. "You're talking about my job," he says. "And Caroline." "I'm talking about the bees," Eliza says, without the trace of a smile. "What else would I be talking about?" But Owen hears what she means, and he sits with it, and he does not feel, for the first time since arriving, that he is supposed to quickly process this insight and then feel better. He simply sits with it, letting it be what it is, uncertain and unresolved, like a calculation that has not yet arrived at its answer, but is proceeding in the right direction. This is something else the bees have been teaching him, without his fully realizing it. To tolerate incompleteness, to allow things to be unfinished, in process, on the way to somewhere rather than already arrived. His entire professional life had been organized around the completion of drawings, the finalization of plans, the moment when a building was approved and its form fixed forever. He had always been in a hurry to reach the point where uncertainty ended and the certain thing began. But the bees are never done. A hive is never complete. It is always in process, always changing, always responding to the season and the weather and the available forage and the age of the queen. The work is never finished because the work is the life, not a means toward some separate end. In the second week of July, Owen receives a letter. It comes with the Tuesday post, a single sheet of cream writing paper in an envelope he recognizes immediately from the handwriting on it. Caroline's hand, the neat, precise script of a woman who was taught penmanship seriously and never saw reason to abandon it. He takes the letter to his room and sits on the edge of the bed and reads it. It is not unkind. Caroline is not an unkind person. It explains, calmly and clearly, that she has given considerable thought to their engagement and to the events that led to its ending, and that she has concluded with great care that the ending was right, not because of the error at work, she writes, or not only because of that, but because she has realized that what she was drawn to in Owen was not Owen himself, but a version of Owen that she had constructed from limited evidence, an Owen who was always certain, always forward-moving, always confident. The error had revealed a person who was more uncertain, more fragile, more genuinely human than that constructed version, and she was honest enough to admit that she preferred the constructed version, that she was not sure she had the patience or the inclination to love the real one. It is, in its way, a remarkably honest letter. Owen reads it twice and then folds it carefully and places it on the washstand and goes downstairs. Eliza is in the kitchen, making bread, her hands buried in the dough. She looks at him when he comes in, reads something in his face, and does not speak. Owen sits at the kitchen table, and they are quiet together. The only sounds the wet thud of bread dough and the wind through the open window. And after a time, Owen says, "She said she preferred the version of me that didn't really exist, the confident one, the one who never made mistakes." Eliza works the dough for a while before answering. "Did you prefer that version too?" Owen thinks about this seriously, the way he has been learning to think about things since coming here. "Yes," he says finally. "I think I did. I worked very hard to maintain it. And when it came apart, I couldn't get it back. It was like trying to reconstruct something after you've understood how it was assembled. You can see all the joints. Once you see them, you can't unsee them." Eliza turns the dough, folds it, presses it down with the heel of her hand. The bees have a practice, she says, that might interest you. When a bee dies inside the hive, other bees remove the body immediately. They carry it away from the hive, deposit it at a safe distance. They do this not from sentiment, but from necessity. A dead bee left inside the hive introduces disease, attracts pests, degrades the environment of the living colony. So the dead are removed efficiently, without ceremony, and the hive continues. I'm not sure whether you're telling me to get over it or to grieve properly, Owen says. I'm telling you that the hive does not stop working because one member has died. It continues. It incorporates the loss and continues. The bee that died was part of the hive while she lived. After her death, she is part of what the hive must release in order to continue living. Both things are true. Owen watches his grandmother's hands working the dough. Those unhurried, capable hands that have been performing this same task every week for 50 years, and he thinks about what it would take to know yourself as well as she knows herself, to trust your own hands as she trusts hers. Caroline was right, he says slowly. Not about preferring the constructed version. That's her limitation, and I understand it, but I won't pretend it isn't painful. But she was right, that the real Owen was more uncertain and fragile than I wanted anyone to see, than I wanted to see myself. And now I don't know what to do with that, with a version of myself that makes mistakes and doesn't know what comes next. Eliza covers the bread dough with a cloth and wipes her hands on her apron. She comes to the table and sits across from him, and for a moment, she simply looks at him with those dark, still eyes. When I was 23 years old, she says, I was engaged to a man named William Bassett. He was a farmer's son from the next valley, a good man, hard-working and honest. We were to be married in the spring. Owen looks at her with surprise. He has never heard her speak of this. That winter, he went to cut timber on the upper slopes, and there was an accident. A tree fell incorrectly. He died on the hillside before anyone could reach him. I didn't know, Owen says. I'm sorry. I was devastated. I was not dramatic about it, because I was not then a dramatic person, and I'm not one now. But I was destroyed in that quiet way that grief destroys, from the inside, leaving the outside intact but hollow. For a year I barely lived. I kept the farm going because the farm required keeping. But I was not there, not really. The person who fed the chickens and milked the cow and tended the kitchen garden was a mechanism, not a woman. She pauses, and the kitchen is quiet around them. The following spring, someone gave me a hive, a neighbor, Thomas Finch, who kept bees himself and who had known my family all his life. He brought the hive one morning on a cart, set it up at the edge of the orchard without asking permission, and said, Take care of these, Eliza. See what they teach you. And what did they teach you? Eliza is quiet for a moment. Outside, a blackbird is singing in the apple trees, its song intricate and effortless. Everything, she says. Over time, not quickly, not all at once, but everything I needed to know about how to live. The bees showed me what a community looks like when every member contributes according to their nature. They showed me what work looks like when it is not about achievement or recognition, but simply about the doing of what needs to be done. They showed me what patience looks like, what attention looks like, what it means to be fully present in a single moment rather than always somewhere else in your mind. And they showed me something else, the thing that mattered most. They showed me that life does not require understanding. The bees do not understand why they build hexagonal cells, why the mathematics of the hexagon is the most efficient possible use of wax and space. They simply build what they have always built, what their nature drives them to build. The meaning is in the doing, not in the knowing of why. Owen is quiet for a long time, listening to the blackbird and the distant hum of the hives. "I've been trying to understand," he says, "why the error happened, why Caroline left, why everything seemed to collapse at the same time. I thought if I could understand it, I could fix it, could make sure it wouldn't happen again." And can you understand it? Partially, some of it, but not all of it, maybe not even most of it. Then perhaps you must do what the bees do. Live according to your nature, do the work that is in front of you, and trust that meaning will emerge from the doing, even when the why remains opaque. 3 days later, in the warm light of a mid-July afternoon, Eliza announces that it is time to take the first honey of the year. This is the moment toward which all the spring and early summer work has been building. The harvest of what the bees have made from months of labor, from hundreds of thousands of individual foraging flights, from the collective effort of the entire colony, applied with quiet and persistent dedication to the transformation of nectar into something both necessary and miraculous. Eliza has been preparing Owen for this day, explaining the process over several evenings. How to identify the capped frames, where the honey cells have been sealed with wax, indicating that the water content has dropped sufficiently for the honey to store without fermenting. How to use the uncapping knife to slice away the wax cappings, how to load the frames into the extractor, the hand-cranked centrifuge that spins the honey out through centrifugal force without destroying the comb. They begin at 8 in the morning, while the air is still cool. Eliza lights the smoker, and Owen helps carry the equipment to the first hive. He has his linen coat and veil, his hands bare, as Eliza has taught him, moving with the deliberateness he has been practicing. The first hive gives them 6 frames of fully capped honey, golden and heavy, each one weighing perhaps 4 pounds. Owen carries each frame carefully to the table, set up in the shade of the largest apple tree, and Eliza shows him how to hold the uncapping knife, how to apply warmth to make the blade slide smoothly through the wax, how to lift the cappings away cleanly. The honey is extraordinary, not just as substance, but as phenomenon. The golden translucency of it, the way it catches light, the smell that rises from the uncapped cells, a complex sweetness that contains within it all the flowers of Devon summer, the clover and the bramble and the apple blossom and the wild rose, an entire landscape distilled into this amber richness. "Smell it," Eliza says, and Owen bends over the uncapped frame and breathes, and the smell is so rich and so complex that it is almost overwhelming, almost too much, like encountering a piece of music that contains more emotion than one was prepared to receive. They work through the morning without rushing, moving from hive to hive, extracting only from the most productive, leaving sufficient honey in each colony to sustain them through the leaner weeks of late summer before the autumn forage begins. Eliza makes these judgments with quiet authority, and Owen understands enough now to see the care behind them, the way she takes only what can be spared, leaves always more than the minimum, works not to maximize her own harvest, but to ensure the colony's continued health and abundance. By midday, they have extracted perhaps 60 pounds of honey, which runs through the extractor in streams of deep amber, collecting in a large pail beneath the spout and filling the air with its extraordinary sweetness. Owen stands watching the honey run, watching this substance that bees have spent millions of years perfecting their ability to create, and he feels something shift inside him, something small and quiet but definite, like a window being opened in a room that has been closed for a long time. He's not healed. He knows this. The loss of his work and his relationship still aches. The error still sits heavy in his chest when he thinks about it. He is not yet sure who he is without the life he had constructed, or what he will do when he returns to London, or whether he will return to London at all. But he is here. He is in this warm July afternoon, with his hands smelling of beeswax and his eyes full of amber light. And this is enough, for now, to stand on. This is real, this specific moment, this honey running from the extractor. This woman beside him, who has learned over 40 years how to live with loss and continue, how to tend what needs tending and release what cannot be held. That evening, as the shadows lengthen across the orchard and the bees complete their last foraging flights of the day, Owen and Eliza sit on the garden bench with cups of tea, and between them on the bench, a small pot of the new honey, still warm from the extractor. Owen dips a spoon into the honey and tastes it, and the flavor is everything the smell promised. Deep, complex, containing the taste of all summer long. All that labor and purpose and quiet collective intelligence reduced to this sweetness on his tongue. It's extraordinary, he says. It really is extraordinary. Yes, Eliza says, it is. They sit in the evening warmth, and the bees settle into their hives, and the birds begin their evening songs, and the Devon hills go golden, and then rose, and then a soft, deep green as the sun descends. Can I ask you something? Owen says. You can ask me anything. Thomas Finch, who brought you the hive, what happened to him? Eliza is quiet for a moment, and Owen wonders if he has ventured somewhere he should not have. But then she says simply, we married. 14 years after William died, he was patient. He knew I needed time, and he gave me all the time I needed, and when I was ready, he was there. He died 12 years ago, Owen says, remembering. Yes, we had 31 years together. She pauses. 31 years that I would not have had if I had not allowed myself to be ready when the time came. Grief is necessary, Owen. Loss is real. But it is not the end of the story, unless we decide it is. Owen looks out over the orchard toward the hives, white in the evening light, still and purposeful. What would you do, he asks, if you were me? Starting over at 28, with no position and no prospects, and no idea what comes next. Eliza considers this for a long time. A single bee, a late forager, returns to the nearest hive and disappears inside, and the entrance is still. I would go slowly, she says at last. I would not try to rebuild immediately, to replace what was lost with something similar as quickly as possible. I would take the time to understand what I actually want, as distinct from what I thought I wanted or what seemed expected of me. And how would I know the difference? Pay attention to what gives you energy and what drains it, what you could do for hours without noticing the time, and what exhausts you even in small amounts, what makes you feel like yourself, and what makes you feel like a performance. Owen thinks about this. He thinks about drafting tables and structural calculations and client meetings and the particular anxiety that accompanied every design decision, the constant fear of being found inadequate. And then he thinks about the past month, about working in the garden in the early mornings, about the afternoon hours with the bees, about the satisfaction of physical work with clear outcomes and immediate results. "I'm not sure I want to be an architect," he says, and it is the first time he has allowed himself to say this, the first time the thought has made it from somewhere deep inside him to the surface of speech. Eliza says nothing, simply waits. "I think I became an architect because it seemed like the right thing for someone with my education and interest to do, because it was respectable and intellectually demanding and would provide a good income, because my father was pleased by it." He pauses. "Not because I loved it." "Do you know what you would love?" He thinks of the honey running from the extractor in its amber stream, of the bee landing on his hand in the first week and cleaning its antennae before departing, of the way the hives sound at different times of day, different times of year, that deep, complex humming that is the sound of a community working in concert toward a shared purpose. "I know what I don't want to lose," he says. "This, what you've taught me here, the way of paying attention that you've shown me. I don't know yet what to do with it." "That is enough for now," Eliza says. "Knowing what you value is the beginning. The rest follows in time." August comes, and the Devon countryside reaches its fullness. The hedgerows thick with blackberries, the fields golden with barley and wheat, the orchard trees beginning to show the first blush of ripening apples. The days are long and warm, and the evenings soft, the nights still short enough that darkness feels like a brief pause rather than a destination. Owen has been here nearly 2 months now. He has stopped measuring his days in terms of what he should be doing, what he ought to be planning, what London demands of him. He has stopped performing the mental architecture of his previous life, stopped trying to sketch the outline of a future from the fragments of a past that no longer fits. He rises early and helps Eliza with the morning chores, and in the afternoons, he tends the bees with an increasing confidence and skill that Eliza acknowledges without excessive praise, but with something more valuable: the trust that communicates itself in the quality of work she allows him to do alone, the additional responsibilities she quietly gives him, the way she sometimes stands back and simply watches him work and says nothing. He has begun to write, something he has not done since school, filling the evenings when the light is still good with observations and descriptions, the behavior of the bees, the patterns of the seasons, the things Eliza says, the quality of mornings in the orchard and evenings in the garden. He does not know what the writing is for, whether it is moving toward anything publishable or useful, but it feels right in a way that architectural drawings never quite did, feels like the activity of his actual mind, rather than a performance of what his mind ought to be doing. Eliza, discovering him writing one evening, says nothing, but the next morning there is a new journal on the kitchen table, leather-bound, its pages clean and cream-colored, waiting. In the last week of August, Owen's mother visits for 3 days. She is a kind, perceptive woman, and she watches her son during her visit with the particular attention of a parent trying to assess a child's well-being without appearing to do so. On the last evening of her visit, she and Eliza sit in the garden while Owen is upstairs, and she says to Eliza, "He seems different, better. What have you done?" "Nothing," Eliza says. "The bees did it." Owen's mother smiles, not quite believing this, but understanding something true in it. "He's going to stay longer, isn't he?" she says. "It is not quite a question. Through the autumn at least, I think. There is more for him to learn here." And then Eliza is quiet, watching the last light leave the sky over the orchard. Then he will go and do whatever he is meant to do. I don't know what that is. I don't think he does yet. But he will know it when he finds it, because he's learning now how to tell the difference between what he truly wants and what he merely thinks he should want. That knowledge, once you have it, you don't lose it. On the morning Owen's mother departs, he walks her to the village cart and embraces her longer than he has embraced her in years. "You look well," she tells him, holding his face in her hands briefly, as she did when he was small. "I am," he says, "or I'm getting there. Your grandmother is a remarkable woman. I know. I didn't know before, but I know now." September brings a different quality to the days. Cooler mornings, a new slant to the afternoon light that is somehow both beautiful and melancholy. The first leaves beginning to turn in the trees at the top of the hill. The bees are preparing for winter, reducing their flights, concentrating on building up their honey stores, the hum of the hives taking on a deeper, more interior quality, as though the colony is drawing inward, consolidating itself for the long months ahead. Eliza explains to Owen that autumn is a critical time for the beekeeper, the time when decisions made now will determine whether the colony survives the winter. The hive must be left with sufficient honey, neither too much nor too little. It must be protected from wind and damp, but not sealed so tight that ventilation fails. The entrance must be reduced to prevent mice from entering, but not so far reduced that the bees cannot make their necessary cleansing flights on warmer winter days. It is, she tells him, a time for careful preparation, for attending to what can be controlled and accepting what cannot, for trusting the colony's own intelligence and resilience, while providing the conditions in which that intelligence and resilience can be most effectively expressed. Owen listens to all of this and hears, as he has been hearing all summer, the layered message beneath the literal content, how to prepare thoughtfully for difficult periods, how to provide the right conditions without trying to control outcomes, how to trust one's own resilience while not confusing trust with recklessness. One afternoon in mid-September, sitting in the orchard with the remains of the apple harvest around them, baskets of green and gold and red, the smell of bruised apple on the air, Owen says, "I've been thinking about what comes next." Eliza waits. "I've been offered a position through a university contact as a research assistant in agricultural science. The person who offered it knows what happened in London, and he's not put off by it. The work would involve studying traditional farming practices, how they function, what knowledge is embedded in them that we've been losing. It doesn't pay well. It's not prestigious. It would require living in the country, moving between different farms, spending time in places like this." He pauses. "I keep waiting to feel uncertain about it, but I don't. It feels like the first right thing I've known in a long time." Eliza nods slowly. "Then it probably is." You're not going to caution me about being too hasty, about practical considerations. You're 28, not 18. You've already had the cautious, practical life, and you've learned from it what you needed to learn. I trust you to know yourself better now than you did a year ago. Owen looks at the hives visible through the last of the apple trees, their white forms solid and purposeful in the September light. I'll miss this, he says. I'll miss you. You can come back whenever you need to, Eliza says. The hives will be here. I will be here. Some lessons take years to absorb, and you may find you need reminders. I think I'll always need reminders. Most people do. That's not weakness. That's what it means to be human rather than a bee. She says it so dryly that Owen laughs, genuinely, for the first time in months, the laughter rising out of him easily and naturally, and Eliza's eyes warm with something that is not quite a smile, but contains all the satisfaction a smile carries. A week before Owen is to leave, Eliza takes him to the hives at dusk, the time she says she loves most, when the day's foraging is done and the bees have settled, and the hive emits a low, deep, steady humming that is the sound of the entire colony at rest after the day's labor, each bee contributing her warmth to the collective warmth of the winter cluster that is already beginning to form inside. In the early days of September, Owen accompanies Eliza to the village, a walk of 3 miles along lanes deep with shadow and late summer flowers. They go to purchase supplies, muslin cloth, and new foundation sheets for the hive frames. And while Eliza is in conversation with the ironmonger, Owen wanders to the small post office and sends a letter to the man who offered him the research position, accepting it, committing to a start date in November. When he tells Eliza on the walk home, she says only, "Good," and they walk the rest of the way in a silence that contains approval, satisfaction, the particular quiet between people who understand each other well enough to communicate the important things without words. The letter to his mother takes longer to write. He sits at the kitchen table 3 evenings running before he finds the right words, words that convey not just the practical details of his decision, but something of what has changed in him, how he has changed, what this summer has done to his understanding of himself and the world. He writes, "I came here broken, I think. Though I would not have used that word then, I was not willing to admit how thoroughly what happened in London had undone me, not just professionally, but in some deeper way, in my understanding of who I was and what I wanted, and whether those things had ever been real. Grandmother has not repaired me. I want to be clear about that, because repair implies returning something to its previous condition, and I have no desire to return to my previous condition. She has done something different. She has shown me, through example rather than instruction, through 40 years of patient and unhurried attention to a particular piece of the world, what it looks like to live deliberately, not grandly, not adventurously, but deliberately, with full awareness of what you are doing and why, with respect for the things that are not yours to control, and commitment to the things that are." He pauses, looks up from the letter at the kitchen, at the scrubbed table, and the blue-painted dresser, and the window looking out over the garden where the evening light is golden on the runner beans, and he thinks that he will remember this kitchen for the rest of his life, this specific quality of evening light, this smell of beeswax and old stone, and the perpetual faint sweetness of honey. He writes, The bees have taught me something that I think I was not ready to learn before now. That contribution is not the same as achievement. That work done in service of something you genuinely care about is different from work done in service of an image of yourself that you are trying to maintain. I do not know yet if the research position will be what I hope it will be, but I know that I am approaching it differently than I approached architecture, without a fixed image of the person I am supposed to become through it, without the anxiety of maintaining a performance. I am approaching it with something more like curiosity, more like a bee setting out in the morning, knowing generally what she seeks, but open to whatever she finds. They stand together without speaking, Owen with his hand resting lightly on the side of the largest hive, feeling the vibration of it, the warmth, the steady pulse of all those thousands of living creatures maintaining their communal existence through the simple and extraordinary fact of being together. The sky above them deepens from gold to rose to a luminous deep blue, and the first stars appear, faint at first, then brighter, and the smell of the evening is the smell of autumn in Devon, apples and wood smoke, and the deep, sweet, faintly fermenting smell of overripe fruit and damp earth. Eliza says, when you are far from here and things become difficult, as things will, I want you to remember this sound, this warmth, what it feels like to be in the presence of something that knows without knowing, that works without ambition, that endures without drama. Remember that this exists, that you have been part of it, however briefly, that you carry something of it with you now. Owen stands very still, absorbing the warmth through his palm, listening to the humming that contains within it all the gathered summer, all the labor and the learning of the past months. I will, he says. I promise. They stand in the dusk until the stars are fully out, until the last light leaves the sky and the hives glow faintly white in the darkness, and the humming continues, steady and deep, as it has continued through all the summers and winters of Eliza's long life, as it will continue through all the summers and winters to come. The morning Owen leaves, Eliza presses into his hands a small package. Inside it, wrapped in a clean cloth, are 2 jars of this summer's honey, the same honey he uncapped and extracted in the golden July afternoon, the amber substance that contains within it the taste of all those Devon flowers, all that collective labor, all that patient, purposeful, unhurried life. When things feel too complicated, Eliza says, open one of those and taste it. Let it remind you what simplicity feels like, what sweetness feels like when it has been genuinely earned. Owen holds the jars carefully, feeling their weight. Thank you, he says, and the word is wholly insufficient, and both of them know it. But Eliza nods as though it is exactly right, because between people who understand each other, the word that matters is not the word that is said, but the full weight of all the unsaid words behind it. He walks down the lane with his bag, and at the bend where the road turns and the farmhouse will disappear from view, he turns and looks back. Eliza is standing at the garden gate, her white hair bright in the morning sun, her hand raised once in farewell, and behind her, the house and the orchard and the hives in their arc, and above them all the open Devon sky. He raises his hand in return. Then the road bends, and she is gone, and he is walking forward into a future that is genuinely uncertain, genuinely open, containing in it the possibility of failure and the possibility of something he has not yet imagined, and he carries with him in 2 jars of amber honey, and in the memory of all those evenings at the hive and all those conversations in the orchard, and all those patient demonstrations of the only kind of wisdom worth having, something that will not leave him, something that has settled into him as quietly and completely as warmth settles into stone on a long summer afternoon. He walks forward through the Devon morning, and behind him, visible for a moment through a gap in the hedgerow, the white hives catch the morning light, 14 small structures containing between them something extraordinary, hundreds of thousands of lives organized around a single shared purpose, working with neither ambition nor resentment, contributing according to their nature, accepting the roles that the hive requires of them, and in this collective acceptance, creating something none of them could create alone, something sweet and golden and lasting and good. Owen carries this image with him. He carries it through the months that follow, through the work of settling into his new position, through the slow and sometimes difficult process of rebuilding a life whose foundations are now different from what they were. There are hard days, days when the old anxiety returns, when he second-guesses himself, when the loss of what he thought his life would be presses down with unexpected weight. On those days, he opens one of Eliza's jars of honey. He does not always eat any. Sometimes, he simply removes the lid and holds the jar and breathes the smell of it, that deep, complex sweetness that contains the entire Devon summer in its amber depths. All that labor and patience and collective intelligence reduced to this simple substance, this gift from 10,000 workers who will never know what became of the fruits of their work, who need not know, for the work itself was the point, the doing was the reward, and the honey was simply what remained when the living was done. He thinks of Eliza at her hives, moving through the morning with that unhurried deliberateness, her bare hands steady, her whole presence calm and present, and completely here. He thinks of what she said to him on his first morning at the hives. Come closer. Be calm. Let them land. Let them investigate and find nothing threatening. Trust that they will leave when they find what they came to find. He tries to apply this to his own life, to approach each day as Eliza approaches the hives, with attention and respect, without forcing, without clutching at outcomes, without the need to perform competence to himself or anyone else. It is not always possible. He is not Eliza, has not had 40 years of practice, is still learning to tell the difference between genuine calm and merely performed calm, between trust in the process and passive avoidance of necessary action. But he is learning, and the learning he has come to understand is not a journey toward a destination called mastery. It is simply the living of each day with as much attention and honesty as he can manage, accepting that yesterday's understanding may be insufficient for today's challenges, remaining open to correction, to adjustment, to the possibility that he is wrong and will need to change. This, too, the bees have taught him, that the hive is never finished, that the work is never done, that to be alive is to be always in process, always responding, always paying attention to what is actually present, rather than what you expected or hoped to find. He writes to Eliza every month. She writes back in her careful, spare hand, never more than a page. Her letters full of observations about the bees and the farm and the village, about the quality of the autumn forage and the first frost, and the way the winter light falls across the orchard in January, thin and blue and beautiful in its severity. She mentions in one letter that the seventh hive did swarm after all, in late August, a week after Owen left, and that she managed to catch the swarm in a new hive, and now has 15 colonies going into winter, the best she has had in years. In another letter, she describes a morning in November when she went to the hives in fog so thick she could barely see the nearest tree, and how she stood at the hive entrance and listened, and the sound she heard was the deep, quiet hum of the winter cluster, each bee vibrating her flight muscles to generate heat, all of them together, creating the warmth that will carry the colony through to spring. She says it is her favorite sound in all the world. She says it sounds like perseverance. She does not add anything else, and she does not need to, because Owen understands exactly what she means, understands that she is not only talking about bees. He keeps her letters in a leather folder on his desk alongside his own journals from that Devon summer, and sometimes in the evenings when the day's work is done and the room is quiet and the lamp burns low, he reads through them and finds himself returned, briefly but completely, to the orchard in July, to the warmth on the backs of his hands and the hum of the hives and the smell of beeswax and new honey and the particular peace of a summer afternoon in Devon when nothing is required of you except to be present, to be still, to listen to what the world is saying. But that time is not now. Now the sun is up and the clover is open and the morning is full of possibility and the bees are flying and all is as it should be, as it has always been, as it will continue to be long after Owen has found his way and Eliza has taken her rest and the farmhouse has passed to other hands who may or may not understand what it holds within its ancient walls, what wisdom lives in its orchard and hums in its hives, and what it holds, what it has always held, what will persist long after the last jar of honey has been opened and tasted, and the last letter has been read and set aside, is this: the knowledge that attention is a form of love, that patience is not passivity, but the most active form of trust, that the world offers its teachings continuously in the movement of bees and the turning of seasons and the quality of light on an autumn morning. And all that is required of us is the willingness to be present, to be still, to let what is real and true and necessary find its way through the noise of our anxieties and our ambitions and our fear to the quiet place within us where genuine understanding lives. This is the beekeeper's wisdom. This is what 40 years of tending hives in a Devon orchard can teach, if you are willing to learn it. Not quickly, not all at once, but slowly, through the accumulation of mornings and seasons and small revelations, through the patient repetition of simple acts performed with full attention, through the gradual and quiet discovery that simplicity is not the enemy of depth, but its truest precondition, that the smallest and most ordinary things, a bee on the back of your hand, a jar of amber honey, the sound of a hive in the evening, contain within them everything that matters, if only you have the patience and the willingness and the courage to look and to keep looking and to trust that what you find will be sufficient, will be more than sufficient, will be exactly what you needed all along. And now, dear listener, as Owen walks into his morning and Eliza returns to her hives and the Devon countryside hums with all its summer abundance, it is time for you to rest. Let the sound of bees fill your imagining, that deep, steady, complex humming that is the sound of purposeful life, of work done in common, of thousands of small lives adding up to something greater than any single one of them could achieve alone. Let your thoughts slow like bees returning to the hive at dusk, each one carrying what she gathered, each one folding herself into the warmth of the cluster, releasing the effort of the day into the collective ease of the night. Let the weight of everything you carry today settle and soften and release, like honey running slowly from a comb in warm amber streams, moving with gravity rather than against it, finding its level, pooling in the quiet places. Let yourself be held by this moment, this warmth, this darkness behind your closed eyes that is not empty but full, full of everything you are and everything the day has given you, and everything rest will bring. You do not need to understand everything tonight. You do not need to solve what remains unsolved, or repair what remains broken, or plan what has not yet been decided. You need only this, to be here, in this breath, in this warmth, in this gathering quiet. The bees are in their hives. The flowers have closed. The Devon hills are dark and still and sweet with the smell of a day well spent. And you too are allowed to close, to still, to be sweet, with the memory of all the good things this day contained, however small, however easily overlooked. Close your eyes. Let your breathing slow to the pace of the hive at night, deep and steady and unhurried. Let sleep approach as it knows how to approach, naturally, without your assistance, without your effort or your will. Simply remain open. Simply remain present. Simply allow what comes to come. You are safe. You are held. The night is long and gentle and full of rest. And morning will come, as it always comes, with its bees and its flowers and its particular quality of light, ready to begin again. Sleep now, as the bees sleep in their warm cluster, gathered together in the darkness, sharing warmth, sustaining one another through the long cold hours, toward the morning that will come, as it always comes, bright and full of possibility and the smell of flowers. Good night.